In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Years ago when I was in high school, when I was in high school, we had a program for special education going on at the same time. The rest of us had our normal classes. And our high school provided educational services to some young people, shall we say, had some pretty significant distress. You know, they couldn't regulate their emotions or their behavior, and so oftentimes we could hear them screaming and crying from down the hall. And I can remember a time very clearly in my freshman year. I was sitting in French class with a wonderful teacher named Mrs. Sabula, and somebody asked her what was going on. And she said, well, that's the special education class. They're here, and sometimes they get really worked up and start making a lot of noise like that. And then somebody blurted out, as you know, we were young people, we didn't quite have our filters fully in place at that point, and said, well, why are they here with us? And our teacher stopped, looked this person straight in the eye and said, they are here for the same reason you are, to get an education. We never dared question her again. And I'm very thankful for that, because something about the culture in my hometown and the way our teachers behaved was they were able to communicate incredible compassion, especially when there was a student who would say got off course or would be off kilter. You know, they would look beyond the behavior towards what was going on deep and what this person truly needed. And there's always the temptation, I think, as human beings, when we see other people, if they're behaving in a way we may not like, that we can view them as a problem. And saying this person is just bad news or whatever, and then want them gone. But as we can find, that is not a gospel value, because what the gospel calls us for is reconciliation, understanding, forgiveness. I see this played out quite a bit in our gospel story for today of the Gerasene demoniac. And we can set aside just for a moment the notion of the demon possession and the pigs and everything that took place in that. And maybe just focus for a little while on the fact that there was a man here. There was a human being who had some problems. His problems being so severe that he couldn't function within his society or in his community. He would have these violent outbursts, and it would be so bad that they would try to chain him up. He had something going on such that, I don't know, I'm thinking perhaps maybe his skin was just crawling and so hypersensitive that he couldn't stand to have anything touching it, even clothing. So he would pull off his clothes and run off into the wilderness to live all by himself. And when we look a little bit deeper in this story, you can also see that this man was not the only one who had problems. You know, the community had a problem as well. The community, because they did not know how to help him, or they did not know how to deal with him. They tried restraining him, thinking, oh, this person is dangerous, he's a problem, we have to make sure he doesn't hurt himself or others. So they put chains and shackles on him, but even that didn't work. Somehow he was able to get out. You know, it can be very tempting to think he did this kind of incredible Hulk move and ripped the chains themselves off of him. But I think perhaps maybe it might have been a little bit more ordinary than that. Maybe he was just so in such a state of agitation and so hyper-aroused and the chains were so uncomfortable, like anything else touching him, that he got out of them kind of in a Harry Houdini kind of way. And afterwards, so upset and so frustrated that he took whatever shackles were left and smashed them with a rock. Again, just my thoughts, just a possibility of how this might have happened. But the end result of all of these problems was that this poor man was separated. He was isolated. He was living amongst the tombs. And there was probably some part of him that didn't want to hurt other people, that didn't want to be screaming at them or to be viewed as this huge problem. So he thought the best way was to get away. And yet even that didn't solve his problems. Being alone didn't help either. And he was screaming and carrying on. So much so that I would imagine everybody else in the village kind of thought, you don't want to go up to those tombs. Don't go there. Maybe it was a story that parents told their children not to go up there, to stay away because that person is a problem, or that person is dangerous, and this, that, and the other. But then Jesus enters the scene. The gospel tells us that he comes into this place where this poor man was living. He was sailing on a boat with his apostles, and they landed on the other side of the lake. And when this man saw him, a couple of curious things happened. One is that he felt drawn to Jesus, so he ran towards him and fell down at his feet. And at the same time, he was also afraid of him. He interpreted him as a threat, probably because his trust in others, just from his life experiences, was so low. So throwing himself down at Jesus' feet, he said, "What do you have to do with me, Son of the Most High God? Have you come to torment me?" Kind of stuck in the middle of that is this unspoken question. Are you going to be like everybody else I have encountered? Or are you going to be different? And we know what happened. Jesus healed the man. He cast out the demons, put him in his right mind, and he was able to put some clothing on. Kind of wonder where it came from. Maybe the apostles had a spare set of clothes nearby. Like, here, take this, put this on. But he was not the only one who needed healing. We can say, and I'm just going to say this briefly about the pigs that had their unfortunate demise in this. But you could see the effect that whatever this problem was with this man, that once it came on to the pigs themselves, they themselves were so, out of sorts, became so off kilter that they threw themselves into the lake. Certainly was a very unpleasant and difficult problem to deal with. This man was not the only one who needed healing, because the problem was not contained to just him. The problem spread to his village, to his families, to the people around him. Probably from all the stories they told, he had a reputation. Probably from all the interactions people had, they might have been truly afraid of him. And so what happened was the people came to see him. They heard the story proclaimed throughout the countryside, all throughout the city. And they said, "What?" And they were not within the mainstream of Jewish culture at the time, so they probably wouldn't have heard all the other stories about Jesus. But they did hear this story of a miracle worker who came, who cast out the demons, and this man was now in his right mind. And the people of the city and the surrounding country came to him. And what I find really interesting, what their first response was. It wasn't joy. It wasn't gratitude. No, it wasn't this feeling of, oh my gosh, a miracle happened here, this man is healed. No, their first response was fear. Their first response was to be afraid. There was a miracle that happened, and I don't know why. I don't know why they would have been afraid. But maybe it had something to do with now they needed to heal as well. Now they needed to adjust the way they thought about this person, adjust the way they related to him, to come up with a new way of being together. Since they couldn't immediately relate to this healed man, probably thinking to themselves, wait a minute, this guy is supposed to be bad news. This guy is supposed to be a problem. and were kind of happy that he went away. They couldn't relate to him, so they asked Jesus to leave. And interesting how that kind of contagion caught on and spread about, because the gospel tells us that all the people asked him to leave. All of the people. And Jesus obliged them. Said, okay. He was going, didn't want to disrupt their community. But what gets really interesting next is what happens with the man for whom the demons had been cast out. He begged Jesus to come with him, probably saying in his head, I don't want to go back to those people. I don't want to go back there. I know what they did to me, the way they treated me and the way they viewed me. And I can't say I blame him at that point. I would probably have a very difficult time going back as well. But Jesus said no. Said, I need you to return to your home and tell everybody of what God has done for you. Which in a way was a gift to the people. Not an easy gift. It certainly was difficult, but it was still a gift. Because not only was he there, they had to come to terms with his healing, the fact that he was different, and they could relate to him in a new way, in a very powerful way. They had to adjust their stories. They had to adjust their way of relating as well. So what would have happened if he had left? What would have happened if Jesus said, okay, come with me, I don't blame you. Imagine the stories about him would have persisted. Those old, ugly stories about this guy who couldn't be contained, who couldn't behave nicely in polite society, and who ran amongst the tombs screaming, never wearing any clothes. So those stories would have prevailed. It would have kept on being told. And they probably would have been saying, at some point he was gone, and we don't quite remember why, but kind of glad. Yeah, glad he's gone. We don't have to worry about this anymore. But by staying, new stories were going to be told. He told the story of everything that Jesus had done for him and how he had been healed. And the people's stories would have had to be told differently as well, saying, yes, this guy was one way, but now he was something else. Now he is interacting with us. We were able to function together as people, as neighbors. Something truly miraculous happened. I share all this with you today because in life we're always going to have problems that we wish would just go away. We wish it would just be, we don't need this anymore. Go away, we don't want it. But life doesn't work like that. We're all together, we all live in community with one another, we have neighbors, friends, families. And the trouble comes if you see a person as a problem versus a human being with a problem. Somebody who may need help, somebody who may need healing, deep spiritual healing, kind of healing that comes from Christ, kind of healing that came to this poor man in the valley of the Gerasenes. Perhaps people push your buttons, and as long as there's a sense of safety there, at least, a certain sense of safety, might encourage you to hang in there, take a deep breath, and pray for this person. Because all of us have our issues. None of us are perfect, but certainly all of us need healing. Just like the people in that village, they may not have been the ones with a visible problem, but they needed healing as well. They needed healing to relate to this man in a new way, to forgive, to be reconciled. They needed the healing like all of us, that deep spiritual healing that comes from Christ. Amen.